Well, thank you for joining us today at the Bookies bookstore in Denver, Colorado. My name is Krista. I'm the manager here, and I have with me Janelle Molony. Thank you so much for being here. Fresh off a win of award,
Yeah.
and that's super exciting. So what brings you to Denver?
So I'm here in Denver because of the Women Writing the West conference and award ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And my latest Emigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids just was, I don't know what the word is, not given, but recognized as the winner for scholarly nonfiction. And this is one of the highest literary awards that a woman can receive as an author. And I was kind of scratching my head a little bit about it because I'm kind of new to this genre, kind of new to writing about the West, and I thought, well, like, what is this? And then I realized there's only 8 awards in the entire country for the, and so I'm the one. There's no second, third, fourth. It's the winner, like a Pulitzer, depending on your accent.
Sure.
So I'm the winner.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed and surprised and pleased and happy and all of those things, and that's really cool. And then the companion to it that I also released last year, the 1864 Diary of Sarah Rousseau, was a finalist, and they also do a great job with giving you a plaque. Again, there's no second, third, whatever. It's so close, but there can only be one winner.
Yep.
So I'm both.
That's
cool. So I've been enjoying that, meeting other women who write about the West or study the West, podcasters and even actresses and such, and realizing I kind of like them. I kind of like these people.
Yeah. You found your crew.
I think so.
That's good.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I've been enjoying that. And then, of course, wearing my sweater, except right now because it's chilly for a Phoenix girl.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weather pulled out for you a little bit.
It did.
Just on the chillier side, but not so much.
It did. I think Colorado wanted me to know that I'm here in Colorado.
We are different. We try sometimes. Well, we're so excited to have you here and to talk about your book. And it's been really fun, even just chatting a little bit off camera and off mic and everything, and hearing the passion that you have for this history, the ways that it ties to your own history, and just the ways that you've discovered things about the United States, about your own self, and everything all wrapped together. So
for sure. Yeah. This is a book I think that anyone in Colorado needs to read, because we know about the Sand Creek Massacres. If you don't Google it, you need to know about it.
Yes.
You need to know. You need to have that conversation. But I think there's a question that comes before it of why?
Right.
Why were the military men, why were the government men, the politicians so angsty and aggressive? What seed was put in their head to get murderous plans to be sanctioned, to be discussed, to be put on the table? What was that thing that got that ball rolling? And it is, I believe, the Platte River Raids that struck fear. And that fear turned to anger. And then they just found the closest thing that looked like the target and fired. And that's it's a very hard conversation to have, but it also helps understand why we did what we did. Why, in general, why do we do what we do? Yeah. And there's always, that motivating factor, or that thing that happened right before, that seed that got planted, and then it turned into that. And so I think that's important. And to see that the Southern Cheyenne and Southern Arapaho that were horrifically massacred, that their plight in that, their experience is so immediately tied to the Northern Cheyenne and Northern Arapaho and the Northern Sioux, and that it was not actually isolated, that they see that there is something in common too, and that spillover of almost like playing the telegraph game of this happened and then just kidding, we think it's this, and then it turns into something so bad and whatever, and how their names got pulled into it and their identity got pulled into it and all of this stuff. And I think it's an important conversation to have also when we're talking about racism and inequality in general, even today, and how we might have strong feelings about a certain event that happened with a certain individual, and it becomes a spillover of those types of individuals and those people in that area, and I could still see the same thing happening, and the media immediately trying to get in and control the narrative or censor the narrative or whatever it is to soften the blow. And I feel like we should talk about that. We should see the facts and then compare the facts to what the media told us happened. But I think about recent events and how various atrocities have occurred, and how the media is very quick to make sure that you only know certain things. And I used to be an investigative journalist. I used to write about events, and I always made sure I included all of the sides. And sometimes, because I believe that readers are intelligent people who can make decisions for themselves, sometimes I would get feedback from readers, and they would be like, you're supposed to be on our side and tell our part of the story. And I said, no, I interviewed you. I heard your side of the story, and I told your side of the story, but I also interviewed the other side, and I listened to their story, and I researched that information too, because I'm non-biased as a journalist, like you're supposed to be. And I presented both sides of the story in print. And so, yes, when readers are leaning this way or that way and making decisions for themselves, I believe that's the way it should be. Yeah.
Ooh.
But we can't do that anymore. Media is so directional.
It is
so biased, and I it's unfortunate.
Well, and I appreciate too, for as harsh a truth as it is, that it was still true. And this time, that no matter if it was a newspaper or a tweet or whatever, it still shows a bias. It still shows the victor's story. It still shows the twisting of the words, even just to say whether it was an attack, whether it was an ambush, whether it was a raid, those little words that get used that so change the narrative, and the ways that it pervaded immigrant stories. Even we were talking about that a little bit, of the moment where suddenly you could see that someone had read that article and used it in their own personal journal, used it in the way that they talked about a people, a location, an event. It's wild.
So I'm happy to have this story out, to have it be recognized as a significant contribution to U.S. history. I never intended for that. Oh my gosh, I just started writing about my family history, and I was like, this is bigger.
Right.
And so that's kind of cool. And so I want to encourage other people to take a look in your own family and see, you've got good stories there. Even your own parents. Ask your parents about what it was like growing up without the internet. That's history and worth digging into. So that's what I've been up to.
That's amazing.
And then, of course, coming and visiting indie booksellers. The Bookies. I guess you've been around for 50 years.
50 years. Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's wild.
Also before the internet?
Yes, also before the internet. But and you got to see our new location.
It's really beautiful.
Yep.
I think you need to have a lot of authors here, because it's really, no, seriously, it's beautiful. The setup is wonderful. There's lots of room for our guests today. And everyone can hear and see really well, and there's so much space. This is a great great spot. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you. We're so excited.
You said Lily. I just love Lily. Catherine. I've read almost everything she's written. I just got goosebumps.
I need to take some of her advice or practice. The land is alive in her stories.
Yeah.
And the people interact with the land. And when I'm working on a fiction and people walk on the land and move past it, and I'm like, you know what? I probably should include more interactivity,
Well, that's like the In Death Comes for the Archbishop. It's almost like New Mexico is the character.
It is a character.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Character in the book.
Yeah.
You know, I've read others.
And the land knows things.
Yeah. Yeah. That book to me was just. I mean, Mia Antonia is the famous one, but Death Comes for the Archbishop. Just to have the land be in the sky, in the mountains.
Yeah.
A character.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's what's so fun about talking to authors is because there are those things that are so deeply ingrained in them, so that there is a level of, oh yeah, let me talk about this thing. But then you also get here's why it's relevant to me right now, or here's what I've been noticing as I've been on a book tour and talked about this a whole bunch. So it's very fun to hear. So I don't know. Well, tell me about your book. That's always a good place to start.
Well, the one that's on display is Emigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids. And this is a discovery of one of the largest Civil War engagements in the West. And that's not just me boasting. I think sometimes I say these things and I'm like, you're the only one that claims that. No, there are newspaper articles from the Times reporting on the events, saying this is the largest battle we've ever seen, that it's an uprising and that everyone needs to watch out. And there's so anyways, there's more to it. It's been recognized as a big deal. But I noticed today I was preparing to talk about the links between what happened in Wyoming to Colorado and reading about that in-between moment of the Platte River Raids. So 370 families are attacked on the Oregon and Overland Trails for good reason. In my opinion, in a nonviolent, you killed our buffalo, we're going to take your horses, kind of thing. And then the Union gets involved and tries to fight back, and they pick a scapegoat and destroy that man's life, basically, even though he does the right thing. So you have this impressive misinformation and then destruction. And then you have, after that, the Sand Creek Massacre.
Right.
But in between, the media, and I don't mean typical newspaper. I think it was the military's communication with the media, the reports that they were giving them, even the titling of events. For example, there was July 25th, 1864, outside of Platte Bridge Station or Fort Casper. So there was a assault on a Blackfoot tribal band that had just gone to battle with the Eastern Shoshone, and the chief was captured. The warriors were murdered. The wives and children were held hostages because someone said, oh, he came through a few weeks earlier. He said he was going to battle, and then we had this big event, so it must be him. But no conversation was had, no evidence, nothing. So they took that, and instead of the truth, they said in the military reports that the fort was surrounded by Indians, and the Indians attacked them or threatened them, and they had to fight back for hours or whatever. That's in official military records. And when you read from the immigrants and the oral histories of that tribe coming down, and immigrants that have been through the raids, and then they see this secondary event with clear, open eyes, they're paying attention to detail now, and they're telling you, no, the Blackfoot, when they were returning from battle, they were not at Platte Bridge Station. They were outside of Platte Bridge Station at Red Buttes. the military came to them and pursued them to set a trap, to kidnap and steal and take and break and all of the things. So there was absolutely no violent pursuit whatsoever other than on the military's behalf to completely innocent people who were set up, blamed, scapegoated. And so depending on where you read and what you read in literature, if it even exists, if it's even acknowledged, it's either the battle at Red Buttes, meaning we're not taking ownership either way, or it's the attack on Platte Bridge Station.
Oh, right.
Yeah, absolutely triggering, putting the blame on it. And so in between the Platte River Raids and the Sand Creek Massacre, we now have a shift in the narrative of they attacked us first. They were encroaching on us. With violent intent, and we had reason to believe that they had already attacked all these other people. Yeah. And so we jumped in with that as our conclusion.
Because we're the heroes.
Right. And then that trickles into, see, no matter where you come from, no matter where they are, they're all bad. And then you start to see that narrative in print of no Indian is a good Indian. So that it starts to emerge and circulate. And then even in military reports that usually are more censored, we start seeing very harsh conclusions, like they're telling the immigrants, and the immigrants are quoting them in their diaries and letters. They're saying, if this person even looks like an Indian, kill them. And you see kill first, ask questions later, or, you start seeing these kinds of things coming out of their mouths. And even in the military reports, they start saying things like, all of them are bad and can't trust any, and they start really smearing their identities, no matter what. And they went to shake various tribal bands down, and I don't think they understood the concept that this tribal band here at this creek literally has nothing to do at all with the one further downstream. Nothing. They couldn't process that. So then we start seeing things from Governor John Evans and Chivington, and they're reflecting on this horror and the very poor job that Colonel Collins did in handling things up north. They said he was a failure. I mean, before the events, he did not even have his men of the 11th Ohio do target practice at all. And so they were completely inebriates, inept. And then he even commented to some immigrants, he said, we have no intention of protecting any immigrants on the trail. They are leaving the Civil War, which is dishonorable. They're leaving their people behind. They're Confederates, so they're bad anyways. We have no, motivation to do anything. And if they get attacked, oh well, it's on them because they're bad and they're leaving their country anyways, and this is just a natural consequence. So his attitude was already, don't care, not going to do anything about it. So Chivington really, took a dump on him. And then that started I'm not going to be like him. And that undercurrent of, we're going to get ahead of this. Again, not understanding that even the Northern Cheyenne and the Northern Arapaho versus the Southern Cheyenne and Southern Arapaho are not the same.
Complete separate.
Enemies even with the Arapaho. And so the preemptive nature to organize and coordinate the Sand Creek Massacre. We went from ugly to uglier to uglier. All based on the narrative. So I'm exposing that. I didn't think I was, really. I was just telling my family story because they're one of the immigrants that are robbed, and they write about it. And I thought, well, they can't be the only ones on the trail being robbed. And then I see it all come together, and I think, the immigrants tell it straight. All the details of who's doing what. The soldiers allude to things, censor things. And then I thought for a while, why isn't this in literature already? Why don't we know about these events?
Yeah.
And I realized through the military reports only, it's, yeah, we were attacked and then we killed 14 of their men and it's handled and we're done. But so they kind of just cut it off. Don't look into this. Don't ask questions.
Right.
They
Here's
attacked
the
us first.
report.
Yeah.
Yes.
Closed case.
Done. Yeah. Yeah. It's wild to think about how the immigrants, they do tell the truth because they have no reason to lie.
Right.
It is their lived experience and that's what they share. Whereas from a military perspective, even governmental perspective, it's, oh yeah, no, we have things to hide because we were at fault, or we were the ones that went out and attacked and they didn't attack us. And, you know, or even
but whoever writes the story gets the book. I mean,
exactly, because they had the ear of the newspapers or the official reports that then go in the history books, as opposed to the Immigrant Tales, which get passed down from family.
If maybe. And I connected with descendants of these immigrant travelers, and they would be like, yeah, we had heard that they'd been attacked, but we don't know where, you know, there's not enough context. And then when you look it up, it doesn't exist. And so at that point, there's even, I've had conversations with the descendants saying, well, like maybe it was just one of those things. And we don't really know if grandpa says he used this rifle that got passed down. Grandpa had to shoot an Indian one time, but we don't really believe it.
Right.
Like, because there's nothing to back it up, nothing to support their actual family history. And so when I took those source accounts and put them in chronological order and wove them all together, it's like, oh!
Yeah, it tells a very different story, but a believable story. Yeah. That's wild.
I used to have more narrative in my book. It was over 600 pages. It's too much. If you're going to come at something, first off, it's hard to read. It's hard to discuss. This topic is a challenge. And then you want an index, and you want more maps, and you want more whatever. At some point, it's not even readable, and it's not affordable. Even at the price, it's a hefty price. I mean, it's a huge book. But I started pulling more and more of myself out of it because I recognize that the immigrants tell the whole story all by themselves. And they do a very good job of it, other than some of the colorful words that they use. Which some have been censored, and I really didn't want to do that. But at some point, it was like, okay, I need you to hear the story. And if you're going to be offended and triggered by these few words, and you can't hear the story, and you can't get to the end, and you can't see the responsibility and the burden and you know what has come of this, then I'm not going to get very far. So if that's an obstruction, then I can remove that obstruction because I need you to get to the point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think more readers need to, or writers need to consider that, of like the shock value stuff. At some point, if there's a political zinger or something very woke and you're offended, no matter what direction it leans, you can't get through the book anymore. Or this makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to see where it's going next. Even if it's the only mention, it's the red flag has been flown and you're done. So I didn't want those. I needed people to like hang on. Like even up front in my preface, I say, you know what, there's not enough Native American voices in here. I'm doing the best I can with what I know from people who were there and documented it, but I don't have that full story. And admittedly, up front, that needs to be researched. Well, hold on. I'm not the one that should tell the story. Like, I don't know the nuance. I don't know the cultural significance of things happening. And I can't, I don't know. I can't see myself saying why different tribes were motivated for this and that, you know, the intrinsic things. I don't know. And so there's obvious biases and there's obvious gaps in the narrative from that specific angle, but I beg that someone more authoritative than me would provide that. And I think that's also really important that authors recognize, or historians recognize that they're not the end all be all.
Right. Yes.
And that the conclusion they make today might actually be proven wrong tomorrow, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We need to be open to being corrected, to learning more, and having, you know, new discoveries come out, and admitting if we're maybe our prior thoughts that we had good evidence for at the time, we thought it was true, we believed it, but new evidence emerged, and we need to surrender to the new information and say, okay, well, the conversation is open. We can have this conversation instead of getting offended by it. And I hope that 5 years from now, this book is outdated. I hope that people would take this and then do next level research. Now that I've dug up the foundation, they can get to it.
Is this the reason for the controversy with Mount Evans?
Mount Evans? No. Well, John Evans, the governor, was part of the plans for Sand Creek Massacre.
Right.
And he and Chivington were very nervous about what had happened in Wyoming. And they made lots of comments about how the Indians, the Plains Indians, are doing all of these atrocities, more robberies, more deaths, more all these things. And it's kind of, it's blown out of proportion.
I was just wondering, because don't they want to rename Mount Evans because Evans was such a bad guy?
Oof.
I believe there's been that discussion.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I'm just wondering if that's part of it.
It could be.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Because it's government sanctioned massacre.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we go to like Mount Meadows Massacre in Utah, 1846, that was not government sanctioned, but a lot of blind eye kind of things until a certain point when it was like all the evidence makes it clear, and then Brigham Young took ownership for the portions he was convicted of, convicted internally, say, yes, I acknowledge my people are involved. And at some point, I think that needed to have happened in John's life, in Chivington's life. And it didn't, really, truly. Collins in Wyoming, he was called out a bit off record, censored, whatever, but you can read between the lines. But he, in this process of saying, we don't even bother to protect the immigrants, we don't care, they're all stupid boobies anyways. But he was part of the capture of the Blackfoot Sioux's wife and children, the tribe, women and children, held them captive at Fort Laramie, the headquarters, and threatened on burning them to death. That was under his say-so. And then when the brigadier general, who's over Colorado and Wyoming, over the entire Nebraska district, I think it was, Brigadier Robert B. Mitchell, when he showed up and he heard what happened, because he wanted peace. Absolutely. He heard about what happened. He said, okay, let's set up a peace council. But when he got there and he learned what Collins had done, Collins was immediately demoted, but not kicked out.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if he
has to leave.
Right. And I think that's not enough.
It's performative.
Right.
Yeah.
But what happened to Chivington? Not even that. My gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then John Evans, not being military, but he had a hand in it. And then I think about John Bozeman from Bozeman, Montana, and the Bozeman Trail that was carved this year. He started everything, and it's not in the book. See, this is why I think it's going to be outdated faster and faster.
Sure.
Well, so in Montana and even in Wyoming, he is celebrated in his story because he established an important trail system through this area, etc., which made sure that the town of Bozeman and Alder Gulch and Virginia City were able to develop faster and blah, blah, blah. Thank you.
Great.
So he built the freeway, right? But they forgot how he did it through lying, trespassing, violent means, and he never paid the price. He got away completely scot-free. It's not stuff that is truly recognized. And I don't know if it's just that this person is big in politics.
Right.
So we amplify the good, we ignore or dismiss or diminish or forget about the bad.
Right.
And then recently I learned the first time he had stepped foot in the treaty-protected buffalo grounds. He was confronted by a chief that said, you can't be here. This is our land. You need to go back. And that chief told him, if you leave, there's no harm, no whatever. Thank you so much. We're not going to hurt you. But if you continue to come on our land, quote, our people will wipe you out. And so he was told that up front and completely ignored it, continued to bring a caravan of wagons, tearing up the soil, all the things. They slaughtered the buffalo. And then he just kept going, and he knew better. And so to me, if I had had that peace, and I didn't have that peace, I knew he just did it, but I didn't know that he had already been very clearly warned. And we had it coming. Things like that, where I'm like, okay, I don't think it's not revisionist history, but it's corrective. We have to remedy. It's almost like, I think about like the Civil War stuff that's happening now, and how they're like, well, we're reducing the celebrated military histories and we're erasing this. Okay, that is to me a degree of whitewashing, prettifying. I've seen that there's a move there's a move in the academic system to change the textbooks to no longer say Civil War or War of the Rebellion. It's now the battle between states. I'm like, no, you need to teach. If you rise up against your mother country, that's treason. It doesn't. You might have a really good reason, and we did it. We rose up against Europe. We did it, and we were rebels and treasonous, and all that. We knew that. But to now say, well, we had a tiff with our friends across what happened was super, super wrong, and of course the army's coming for them, So there's a movement to, they say correct, but no, it's to wash away the very clear, difficult things that we had to go through, so we can no longer, or the next generation can no longer acknowledge it, be hurt by it, moved by it, make a change, make a difference. They're becoming desensitized to it because it isn't aggressive anymore. It isn't serious.
It's not rebellion. We can't say rebellion because that implies that someone else did something wrong and someone said, no, that is wrong, and I've come against it. Instead, no, we just had a disagreement or something. I remember a few years ago, Golden had someone on the city council had that movement of saying, let's wipe out, it shouldn't be called the Revolutionary War because we revolted. No, we can't do that. We can't be the rebels, because if we talk about rebellion, that will encourage our high schoolers to rebel against me. And so there was a walkout, appropriately. There was a walkout of students and teachers to say, no, that's not okay. And the big argument was, well, it was just one councilman who said this and it wasn't actually going to happen. But still, the idea of rebellion is integral to the United States. And so to understand that just because we rebelled and we won in that case does not mean that other people rebelling against us is somehow not okay. Sometimes we are the bad guys.
No matter what. And then a fight will occur. It's coming.
It's important.
But I feel like I'm doing the opposite, where I'm saying, okay, this was super swept under the rug. And I'm not going to stand for that. I'm going to point out all the flaws and all the issues, point fingers, name names, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's so black and white that I don't know how you can unsee once you know what we did. My people, what my people did. I can't unsee it. I can't unfeel it. And usually at book talks, I start off with acknowledging I don't know everything, and acknowledging that the conversation's really uncomfortable.
Yes, yes. But it's important.
It's so important.
It's so important.
It's more important than my discomfort. It really is.
Yes. Well
Yeah.
said. Well said. Well, it's also lovely to talk with someone who is very aware of the hard things that you're telling and the truth that you're telling, but also the ways that you're being very intentional about saying this is, and this is your story, this is your history, and sometimes it's triumphant and sometimes it isn't, because you do feel in ways that your history speaks to wrongdoing. And being able to say that and say, there's nothing I can do about it except tell the story.
Yeah.
And say, there's more to this story that I cannot tell because this is not my history. There are other voices that need to be present here.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Or even like the little people idea of my story doesn't matter, or my history or my life. I'm just one drop in the pool. Okay, well, these immigrants are just writing their trail diaries or just writing a letter back home. And their story, their very isolated, singular story, didn't have that much impact. But we forget that we're all connected.
Right.
And so when all those stories were lined up, then it was a massive impact. And so I want to remind people in general that your story or your ancestor's story is not actually just theirs. There's a network and a system. It's that piece of land's story, the people of that land's story, and it's ultimately one little slice of U.S. history. And we just have to put it in context, look bigger,
Right.
And it's incredible what our experiences are to see how big they really do become when we're all together in it and stuff. Yeah.
But I think things like this also inspire a lot of people of the younger generation to go, no, I do want to find out. I do want to hear. And I see it when people are like, oh, I got to talk to my parents about 9/11. Where were you? And you're like, oh, that is history for us now. And it is that, where were you in this moment? In the same way that asking grandparents or my parents, where were you when JFK passed? Or, where were you during this time period? Because I think particularly, as a white woman, I can only speak to white people. I'm not very good at listening to my mother's stories of history or my grandmother's stories of history, let alone the great, great, great grandparents who came over from wherever or traveled the Oregon Trail or whatever. And so I think there's been an interest in things like this to go, oh, I bet I have a story that slots into this book in an interesting way.
So much.
And that interest and that encouragement to find those family stories that you didn't know existed or you suspected. So,
yeah, you're so right.
So, no, but everybody's down on John Evans now.
I need to Google this.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah.
And I think I could comment on it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, but I haven't heard about it lately, but it's like a big, I don't know. His name is now not as, I don't know.
We're not going to uphold him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like he's got a bad name now.
Well, thank you so much, Janelle. It has been a blast talking to you. I feel like I've learned a lot of stuff. I feel like other people have learned a lot. We're really excited to have you here. And we're excited about your book. The Bookies will have some books on hand, and we'll make sure that you sign a couple of them for us.
Good.
Both of this one and the diary you were speaking about earlier. But yeah, we're excited to have you here and representing this story of the West, of Colorado, of your history and everything all together. So
appreciate it. Thank you so much, Krista.